While everyone waits to see where Roberto Luongo will be traded, he's 3 wins, no losses in regulation, save percentage of .94, not too shabby. Here to talk about the National Hockey League with me and Luongo's situation, our NHL writer Jesse Spector. My name is Tom Vandervoort. And Jesse, what can you tell us about Roberto Luongo? He's obviously handling things pretty well out there in Vancouver right now.
Yeah, I would say that if you are ever an athlete who gets involved in some trade rumors, do yourself a favor and study what Roberto Luongo has done for the last 8 months. He's handled things with humor and grace, and he's performed on the ice as well, which is really the most important thing. And it helps both the Canucks now, and it helps his trade value as well. So this is not a bad problem for the Canucks to have. I think that any GM would love to be in Mike Gillis' shoes right now, having 2 really good goalies, Roberto Luongo and Corey Schneider, and the possibility to trade one for a pretty good package down the line.
Absolutely. Now, this week we've heard some rumors that the National Basketball Association players might be looking at Don Fehr, given what he's done with the NHL and his position with the NHL Players Association. How are players reacting to that rumor?
I talked to Craig Adams, who was very much involved in the labor negotiations over the summer and into the fall and winter. And the NHL players don't want to see Don Fehr go. They really like what he's done for their union and bringing some stability in there after they had 3 executive directors of the union in the last decade. So that's something that the players definitely don't want to see happen, is Don Fehr leaving. But if he winds up going, that's something that they'll deal with when it comes to it. The important thing is that the players are much more involved now in their union, and I think that's something that speaks well for them going forward, where in the past it's really been a very select group of players that have been involved and agents that have been involved. It's a much more open union now, and that's something that Don Fehr has brought with his influence. But I don't think that his job is done. I think that his job is to put this union, the NHLPA, on a solid footing for years to come. And Don Fehr, in my experience, and just watching him over pretty much my entire life as a sports fan, and then more recently in these hockey negotiations since he took over the NHLPA, he's not a guy that leaves unfinished business. So I don't think that there's very much to it, and in fact the CBS Sports report did say that there was no indication that Fehr had any interest in leaving. That's good news for the NHLPA.
Most definitely. And finally, I got to ask you about this wacky shootout stat. We look at the number of shootouts in the East versus West, and it's almost 5 times as many shootouts, or at least 5 times as many shootouts out West. Is that just a weird coincidence, or is it telling us anything?
At this point, it seems to be a weird coincidence. There have been 15 shootouts in the West and just 3 in the East, so it's exactly 5 times as many. It's just one of those strange things. Nobody really seems to have an explanation for it at this point. The funny thing is that when you break it down that way, it winds up being that the league shootout rate and the league rate of overtime games is pretty much exactly where it was last season. It's just that they're all happening in the West so far. And for 1-goal games, there have been 34 1-goal games in the West, including the overtimes and shootouts, and 25 1-goal games in the East. So they're playing close games in both conferences. It just seems like the 1-goal games are being decided later in the West. It's good for those of us who like staying up late on the East Coast and watching those hockey games into the wee hours on Game Center or Center Ice, and I've certainly been enjoying that.
Yeah, it's good stuff as long as you can sleep in the next day. All right, man, listen, thank you so much for your time. We'll catch up with you next week.
All right, thank you.